Welcome to For the Record. I'm Monica Bertrand. Some call railroads the pulse of the economy. Companies like Union Pacific usually get the first glimpse of improving trends as businesses turn to them to haul goods. I sat down with Jim Young, chairman and CEO of Union Pacific, to talk about how the company is navigating this economic downturn.
Railroads are clearly a barometer of the economy, and based on the number of calls I get from economists around the country, they're all asking me, what do we see? Right now, I think everybody's looking for some good news and some signs. What I see is this. After a very strong drop in our loadings when you go back about 6 months ago, I think the best news I can see is that it's maybe stabilized. But I will tell you, I don't see anything that says this thing is moving to the positive. Now, coming down, you've got to stabilize before you start to move up. There are some good signs that I see with customers that are making more inquiries in terms of if they start up a plant, add a shift, are we ready to handle their business? And I told them I'll take their order right now. We've got a lot of assets out there, but I just don't see anything right now that says we got a positive move yet.
Yeah, so almost cautiously, maybe optimistic. I don't want to say optimistic, but cautious. At any other time that you've been in the rail business, have you seen anything similar to the downturn that you're experiencing right now?
No, and I've been in the business about 31 years. If you look back at prior recessions, this is unmatched. And I think what's unique about this one, there's a significant international component. You know, good economists always look at trends, and they try to refer backwards to what happened on prior cycles. This one is unique, and the international piece of this is pretty dramatic when you look at the impact on our economy in terms of where we're at right now.
Expand on that, the international piece.
Well,
what do you
think about movement of production offshore over the years. You think about the last, I would say meaningful recession was probably, I think, early 80s, if I recall. Look what's happened in that timeline. You've had production that's continued to move off. China, Mexico, in terms of a lot of your consumer goods. Auto production has continued to migrate outside of the United States. China being a consumer, again, you always think about import business coming into the country. We're also, you look at the peak of our economy, exporting product to China, or steel. This is a much greater economic downturn than just the U.S. alone.
When you look at clues in terms of business improving, what will you be looking for? And how much lead time do you have in the rail business for some type of turnaround? Is it very quick, or do you have several weeks or months of lead time?
It can turn around very quickly. If you go back to 2003 to 2004, you had a mild recession and you came out. In that timeline, we went from our volume grew in about a 6-month timeline about 10 to 15%. So that's a pretty quick turn. What we are looking at, we take a look at inventories. So obviously your finished automobiles, you look at inventories in terms of coal that we project out. You follow retail sales, you follow consumer confidence that's out here. There is one thing that I feel is important, that we know inventory levels are being managed very tightly when you look at it. And so if you get some kick in demand, consumer demand, I think you can see production start up pretty quickly. I wish I could tell you I'm seeing that demand at this point, but not right now.
Transporting automobiles is a large part of Union Pacific's business. The company has been forced to become more nimble as the auto industry struggles for its life. Revenues from automotive transport were down 55% in the first quarter, volumes down 48%. That's pretty significant. What are you doing to, I guess, shift that sort of auto business that's been lost as we see the auto companies in shambles pretty much?
Well, the first thing we're doing is make certain we don't slip in service. You absolutely, in a time like this, when you think about a crisis many companies are under, you can take your eye off of the things that are important. That is, for us in my business, it's safety and service. We're not letting that slip. The auto industry today, you hit the numbers. You're down almost 50%. I don't see that changing right now. And in fact, We know Chrysler, with their bankruptcy, they're shut down. General Motors will likely be shut down for a while. For us, we're going to be in that business. Rail is the best way to move finished vehicles. We may have a smaller network long term, but I think for us it can be still a very good business.
Outside of the auto industry, which we know is struggling, what are other segments of your business telling you? Energy, agriculture, what are those customers saying?
Well, let's start with energy a minute today. One of the things you look historically in our business, coal, has always been a pretty stable business for us. Today, it's down almost 15% in terms of volume. The whole market's down. What they've seen, obviously, is a downturn in electric demand, power demand. But I also tell you that long term, I think coal's part of the equation. A lot of cases, the utilities own their own cars. What we're trying to do is, as we turn these cars faster, can we save them money? But the ag sector, I don't think food consumption in the world is changing dramatically. Now, you've got some pressure today where when more people eat at home than in a restaurant, you consume less food. But it doesn't change the equation in terms of world population, diets, when you think about products served. I think long-term our ag business can be a very good business. Now, the rest, you get into steel production, cement, lumber, chemicals.
And those are down significantly.
Those are down significantly. Mm-hmm. Reflects the industrial sector in terms of the economy. What they're looking for, and what I think the positives are, is customers are looking at how can they reduce their costs. That means we have customers that are talking to us that in many cases never considered rail.
Let me ask you about sort of a segment of the business. I guess this is part of the agro, which is ethanol, because that seemed to be, much talked about, much touted, that was going to be a huge business, and it doesn't seem like it's turning out that way.
Well, no, it's still a very good business. It has slowed down some, and there are a lot of dynamics going on in the market with the price of corn and the economics. You've had some bankruptcies in terms of some of the producers that are cycling through. But the fact of the matter is, unless the new administration changes their perspective on ethanol, I still see it as a growth business. California will raise their standard in terms of required ethanol within the next couple of years. So ethanol is part of the equation. I think it's going to be part of the equation, at least for the foreseeable future. What's happened is it's slowed down from almost no business to a substantial business, significant double-digit kind of growth numbers. I think it'll be more of maybe a high single-digit number when you look in the next 3 or 4 years.
It's been a cost-cutting story for the railroads, with Union Pacific being among the most aggressive. The company plans to reduce headcount by as many as 4,000 more workers this year. That's in addition to the 5,200 train operators already furloughed. But will it be enough to weather the worst recession in decades? How much more can you reduce? Is there anything left to cut in terms of costs at Union Pacific?
Well, again, if volumes continue to deteriorate, you will reduce number of train starts. That will end up in more furloughs when you look at it. But across the board, I have every department, and I would tell you, I feel good about our team. They understand the financial dynamics. I've had people come in where they've looked at some spending that they've had that said, you know what, we don't need to do this right now. I have not issued an edict. It would be very easy for me to say everybody takes 20% out. Corporate America is littered with corporations over the time where they went too far, too fast. What I've done with our team is say, you understand the seriousness of the situation. I expect you to take a hard look at what you're spending money. And they've done very well. There's more that we can do. But I will also tell you, if volume, this still is in many ways a business that is a high fixed cost investment. When you look at locomotives, I've got over 2,000 locomotives in storage right now. I would tell you we'll be hard pressed to buy another locomotive for the foreseeable future. But there is no model that, what we're trying to do is work our way through this here. I've got those 2,000 locomotives. There's no market for them. They're on the books. We're depreciating them. The investment we made in new railroad, that's still there. You've got that investment that's sunk. So we can do more, but there eventually is a limit in terms of just how far you can go.
And you're not cutting the sales force.
No.
You're sending them on the road.
In fact, we're also doing some things on trying to retain labor. We introduced a program called Alternative Work that instead of the traditional model where if you were a railroad employee, an engineer, a conductor, you were furloughed, you lost your benefits, you lost your pay. What we did actually last summer was introduced a program that for a certain percent of our employees, we're paying 100% of the benefits and we're bringing them into work about 7-8 days a week. What's that all about? You've got trained workforce ready to go when things turn around.
But that leaves you with, I heard you quote, $7 billion of assets really sitting idle. How much longer, can you have those assets sitting idle in terms of, workers and trains and other things waiting for this turnaround? Well,
where we're at, number one, no one predicted this kind of volume downturn. Even my experienced planners within the company, their definition of a serious downturn was maybe 10% reduction in volume. We're running today over 20%. You can't sustain a business with $7 billion of assets not generating revenues. What we're able to do on the labor side right now is, you read a lot about baby boomers retiring. Well, guess what? It is happening. And we are still seeing good attrition in our numbers. We're going to lose probably 3,000 to 4,000 employees through attrition this year. So what that allows me to do is to size that workforce easier, get the folks that are furloughed today back to work.
You actually had a representative, I read, from the United Transport Union who praised you for handling the furloughs the way you are in terms of keeping some people on board with benefits and such. What lessons really have you learned over time in terms of labor, the unions, and what lessons do you think you're going to take away from this downturn that we've seen in terms of labor?
Well, we're about 95% union in terms of all of our jobs, and it's 12 or 13 different unions that have an impact on our business. You always, in many cases, have this mindset of let's fight, and there are issues that sometimes we need to fight over. What I have seen with our unions, the presidents, they recognize they're smart people, they understand the business, they recognize what the potential negative is if the wrong type of legislation passes in D.C. This is a much better environment. Our industry went from an environment with the mergers, you look back last 15, 20 years, the discussion was always about downsizing. I mean, it really was. And we worked our way through that, and we enjoyed a time for the last 3-4 years where we were hiring. And I would tell you, it's much more enjoyable to run a business that's growing and hiring than where we were years ago, where we are today. But I'm confident our union leadership understands the consequences, and we can work together.
Let's move to pricing, because obviously that ties into what the customers may be anticipating. Pricing has been depressed in the industry overall. What are you doing in terms of pricing and trying to keep it as stable as possible during this time when volumes are down and when business is low?
Pricing is, in real terms, is still down. It's only been the last 2-3 years that the industry has been able to get some positive pricing. The Union Pacific in first quarter of this year, our actual core price was up 5 to 6%. Now, separate price from fuel charges. Fuel was down. In fact, so if you looked at our average revenue per unit, I think it was only up about 1% in the first quarter. What we're doing is selling the value proposition. And I will tell you, we've proven it time and time again that good service, customers see the value, they're willing to pay a higher price for that value because it saves them money. In a lot of cases, reduces their inventory costs. If they own equipment, it'll reduce their investment in equipment long term. I'm not going to tell you, the environment isn't tough. You look at areas like domestic trucking, the truck sector, they're very aggressive in pricing. This industry, to sustain growth capital and financial returns, we've got to continue to work on price.
How long do you anticipate this sort of depression in pricing? Do you get any leverage at all in the next, 3 to 6 months, a year?
It's all a function of where we think the economy is going to move. If we're sitting,
but it's pretty much baked in for 2009 in terms of your pricing.
2009, what I have said to our shareholders, we did about 5 to 6% core first quarter. That's how I expect the year to play out. Next year, we're assuming some slight recovery in the economy, and I think we can still see positive price in terms of what. And again, you have legacy contracts. That there's a huge spread between say a 10-year legacy deal in markets. In some of the areas, it's pretty soft, but. I'm assuming we're going to see some economic recovery at least next year.
That's why I instructed my office.
The stimulus bill signed by President Obama several months ago was sold as a way to get the economy moving with billions of dollars targeted for infrastructure projects. But the initiative hasn't yielded any significant fruit for the rails just yet.
Well, I think timing is probably the key issue here. But you think about rebuilding highway infrastructure, the rails will be involved in the cement, stone, steel, lumber that is involved with that type of production. I think the best guess right now is the stimulative effect might be second half of the year in terms of when money will flow. My concern, though, is the negative side is a lot of the states are struggling in terms of their budgets and revenue flow. So you may get some stimulative effect from the feds, but because of the problems at the state level, you may end up where they're reducing some projects. But right now, about all I can tell you is we have inquiries on projects, but we're not seeing anything at this point in terms of actual shipments.
And when that starts to move, are you anticipating that being a segment that's going to move quickly?
I think it will be, because again, the goal on the stimulus money, you had to have a project ready to go. It has to have, again, the goal is to get people back to work, start spending money, get projects going, get them back to work. So those projects, if they start to move, could move fairly quickly.
Can you pinpoint where the recovery in your business might start first? What segment? Would it be in the materials area? Would it be in agri? Not cars, probably, but where do you anticipate that?
Yeah. Well, you're asking me to predict the future, which we've been wrong the last year or so, but here's what I think. We're running about 140,000 cars a week right now, loads. When I think from this point, what are the potentials for some upside? One, I would say, I think there will be a peak shipping season this year. What is that all about? I think holiday shipping, import goods coming in. That's going to depend on the consumer starting to spend some money. We should start to see that probably middle of summer, maybe August. That's out here. I think the ag business is going to turn around in the fall in terms of where we're at. I think you'll see some uptake there. This might surprise you, but I actually think the auto business will come off of extreme lows that you're going to still see the next couple months and start to pick up slightly on the back end.
Why do you think that? What do you think is going to change?
I just think the rate of sales today, and you think some of the incentives, you know, where they'll pay $8,000 for turning your clunker.
Even in these challenging times, investors see Union Pacific's balance sheet as relatively solid. According to Bloomberg data, the company issued $750 million of debt in the first quarter and paid down about $250 million of that debt. Cash on the balance sheet is roughly $1.5 billion. Union Pacific also recently declared a 27-cent a share dividend. I spoke to Jim Young about what else Union Pacific plans to do with its cash.
Well, we consciously last year, about middle of the year, decided things are not looking very well here next year. So we started build cash. We ended the year at about $1.3 billion on the books. We ended first quarter, as you said, about $1.5 billion. We're not buying our shares back right now. We've had a very good program buying back. I still have, I think, about 35 million shares authorized to buy back. We put that on hold until we see some things turning around here. We're being conservative in terms, I've reduced some of our capital spending to about $2.6 billion this year, again, to generate cash. What I've told our employees, our shareholders, is we will get through this. We're going to be a stronger company. We've got the financial horsepower to really encounter a pretty sustained recession.
Union Pacific is keeping its powder dry for a pickup in business. In 2004, the company was unprepared for an economic rebound after it had cut its staff to the bone.
We really stumbled in 2004 when the economy turned around. And listen, I was the CFO then, so I'm part of this here in terms of we were very aggressive in costs. We had acquired some companies over the years, too, that were not healthy with their infrastructure, that we still had some challenges with. So we learned a tough lesson. And I will tell you, customers have long memories. We still have business that we lost with our inability to support customers that time that probably should be back in UP. So what are we doing about it? One, you remember the lesson. Two, you understand what were the drivers that were out there. That means things like understanding your network capability. What is the ability of just your factory, let's use that analogy, to produce at an efficient level of volume? For us, it's about 200,000 carloads a week. That's where we've paid that says with our investment network, that's kind of the optimum point. We're running 140,000 carloads a week right now, so we've got a huge spread there.
I want to move to safety because obviously that deadly crash between the Metrolink commuter train and the Union Pacific freight train got a lot of attention last year. Now, I know that you already in Union Pacific have cameras that face outward from the train so you can see outward. There's been some talk about cameras inside the train in terms of the cabin, and as well voice recorders as they have on airlines. Do you think that's warranted? Is that an extra step of safety that you would want on your Union Pacific train?
Well, as you said, the airline industry has it today. Listen, you could argue, sure, it would improve safety. That's out here. What we're trying to do, though, is to work with our employees in terms of, they want to go home at night at the end of the day. And what we're trying to reinforce is attention in the cab, rules compliance, take care of each other. We've got a program called Total Safety Culture, which is unique in our industry, where instead of me mandating safety, you care about your peer. And it's a peer-to-peer kind of safety focus. So if you have someone that maybe their head isn't quite there today or they're not acting a safe way, you have the capability to help intervene there without a consequence. The tragedy in California is, they had one person sitting up in the cab. The freight railroads, we have two, minimum two. I think that can make a difference.
I want to move to green because clearly there have been some initiatives at Union Pacific and other rails in terms of green, but you have something called the Green Goat. So tell me about the Green Goat. What's that?
It's new technology that was developed on Union Pacific. It's really a battery-operated technology.
It's a hybrid locomotive.
It's a hybrid. Think about it as a hybrid, but it's more at what is used in yards when you're switching in a local community. They're very good in terms of fuel efficiency. They significantly reduce emissions. When you think about, again, a primary battery-powered, emissions are zero in that context. Our industry takes very seriously how we're viewed in the community. We are not an industry that can pick up and move offshore.
So when you look at sort of your hybrid strategy with the locomotives, where do you see it in the next, 3 to 5 years?
Well, we own about 8,000 locomotives. The average life is 20 years, so dramatic change is going to take time. New locomotives you buy today are substantially more fuel efficient, more emissions friendly than a locomotive produced even 6, 7 years ago. So you have a natural progression. We have a program that's called distributed power. I'm not going to get real technical, but it's real simple. Instead of 2 or 3 locomotives in the front of a train, you put one in front and maybe 2 in back, or 2 in front, 1 in back. They're linked with computers, and they help with the dynamics of moving a train over train. They reduce fuel, they're safer, and they reduce emissions. General Electric, I believe, just announced that they're going to focus on a new hybrid road freight locomotive. And the concept there is pretty simple, but it is straight out of a hybrid car, which is today, if you're moving downhill, you're losing all that energy. What they're going to try to do is harness that energy in terms of a battery cycle for a road freight locomotive. We're the largest consumer, close, in terms of diesel fuel of really any company in America. Last year we burned about 1.2 billion gallons. So energy efficiency for us is a huge leverage item. Even though we have, I think you know the math, you can move a ton of freight on a railroad, about 450 miles on 1 gallon of diesel fuel. That's pretty phenomenal when you think about it. it's still such a huge cost for us that working with the manufacturers, we've got to continue to improve.
Is there anything out there that you're going after in terms of new business that's creative, people haven't seen before, you're trying to put in place now so that when there is a rebound, you really can take advantage of it?
We've got a refrigerated train product. It moves out of Washington, California, moves back to New York. That produce you have for lunch or dinner, chances are it was hauled on our railroad. That's a truck competitive business. I've got a new subsidiary called Streamline, which is a logistics arm of our business that can offer full service, one-stop shopping to customers if they want intermodal, they want rail carload business, they want warehousing, all those. Those are new products we're putting into place.
When you look at Union Pacific 3 to 5 years from now, does it look like a very different business in terms of size or shape than it does today?
Well, if I could see the future, which part of my job is trying to see that, we're prepared for a slow recovery. In fact, that's what we're modeling today. But it still doesn't change the long-term strategy. Safety, great service, smart investment pays off for this business. You will not build another railroad in the United States. If you think about what we have, and the rail system in America is unique to any place in the world. It really is. If you go travel to Europe, you look at China, some of the areas that are out here, it provides our producers with a very, very low-cost mode of transportation. And I think, I'm hoping I'm wrong on a slow recovery, but either way, UP, we'll be a very good company.
Despite the twists and turns in the economy, Union Pacific has every intention of staying on track. CEO Jim Young says the lessons he's learned in the past will help position Union Pacific for the future. For the record, I'm Monica Bertrand.